The morning sun rose over the wheat fields of New Saskatchewan, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Maria Chen stood on her porch with a cup of coffee, watching the automated harvesters move through the golden grain. She had lived on this colony world for 12 years now, raising her 2 children and working the land with her husband David. Life was simple here, peaceful, and far away from the crowded cities of Earth. New Saskatchewan was home to 50,000 souls, scattered across 3 major settlements and dozens of farming communities. The colonists grew food, mined minerals from the northern mountains, and sent their products back to more developed worlds. They were proud of their work. They were building something real, something that would last for generations. Maria finished her coffee and went inside to wake the children. It was a school day, and they would complain about getting up early. She smiled at the thought. Normal problems. Simple problems. The kind that made life worth living. That was when the siren started. The sound was unfamiliar at first. The colony had emergency sirens, of course, but they were only tested once a year. Maria felt her heart begin to race. She rushed to the window and looked up at the sky. Something was wrong. The sky was darker now, as if clouds had suddenly rolled in. But these were not clouds. Ships. Massive ships blocking out the sun. David came running down the stairs, his face pale. He had been watching the newsfeed on his tablet. His voice shook as he spoke. We're under attack. Alien ships. They just destroyed the orbital station. Maria felt the world tilt beneath her feet. This could not be happening. Not here, not to them. They were farmers, not soldiers. They had no defenses. They had nothing. But she was wrong about that. Within an hour, the first enemy troops landed on the outskirts of New Hope, the largest settlement. The aliens called themselves the Krethik Dominion. Their ships broadcast a message in crude human language. The message was simple and brutal. Surrender now or face total destruction. The colonists had 2 hours to decide. Governor Elena Vasquez sat in the emergency command center beneath the Capitol building. She was a small woman with gray hair and tired eyes, but her voice was steady when she spoke. Around her, the other colonial leaders waited for her decision. Some wanted to surrender. Others wanted to fight. All of them were afraid. What are our options? Someone asked. The military coordinator, a man named James Park, stepped forward. He had been a Marine before retiring to the colonies. Now he commanded the small security force that kept order on New Saskatchewan. He pulled up a map on the display screen. We have about 200 trained security personnel. Every colonist over 18 has completed basic military training as part of the Frontier Protocol. That gives us roughly 30,000 potential fighters. We have weapons stockpiles hidden in each settlement, and the infrastructure is designed for defense. Someone laughed. It was a bitter, hopeless sound. 30,000 farmers against an alien fleet? We would not last a day. Governor Vasquez stood up. Her hands were steady. Her eyes were clear. We are not just farmers. We are human beings, and we do not surrender. She turned to James Park. Activate the Frontier Protocol. Get every able person armed and ready. Send the emergency beacon to Earth. And tell these aliens that if they want our world, they will have to take it from our cold, dead hands. The room fell silent. Then, one by one, the other leaders nodded. The decision was made. When the 2 hours ended, the Krethik commander received Governor Vasquez's response. It was a single word transmitted on all frequencies. The word was simple and clear. No. The Krethik commander was amused. His name was Draxar, and he had conquered 17 worlds for the Dominion. He had seen many species beg for mercy. He had seen them fight with desperation. But he had never seen a species refuse to even negotiate. These humans were either very brave or very stupid. He suspected it was the latter. Begin the ground assault, he ordered. Show them what happens to those who defy the Dominion. The Krethik troops descended on New Hope. They expected to find frightened civilians running in panic. Instead, they found empty streets. The buildings were dark. The town seemed abandoned. It was a trap. The attack came from everywhere at once. Bullets and energy beams struck from windows, rooftops, and underground tunnels. The colonists had turned their town into a fortress. Every building had firing positions. Every street had kill zones. The Krethik advance faltered, then stopped completely. Draxar watched the battle feeds in growing disbelief. His troops were taking heavy casualties. These were not trained soldiers. They were supposed to be farmers and miners, but they fought like veterans, using tactics that would make a military academy proud. How is this possible? He demanded. His second-in-command, a female officer named Khalith, checked the intelligence reports. Sir, it appears that all human colonies operate under something called the Frontier Protocol. Every colonist receives military training. The settlements are designed with hidden defensive systems. They were prepared for this. Draxar felt a cold sensation in his chest. He had underestimated them. He had thought this would be an easy conquest. Now his troops were dying in the streets of a farming town, killed by people who grew wheat for a living. Send in more troops, he ordered. Overwhelm them with numbers. But the colonists adapted to every attack. They used their knowledge of the local terrain to set ambushes in the forests. They modified their farming equipment into weapons. Plasma cutters became deadly energy guns. Mining explosives became powerful bombs. The Krethic had superior technology, but the humans had something more important. They had the will to fight for their home. Maria Chen fought alongside her neighbors. She had a hunting rifle and a bandolier of ammunition. Her children were safe in the underground bunkers with the other young ones. David was 2 blocks away, defending another position. She did not think about whether they would survive. She only thought about making the aliens pay for every inch of ground. Days turned into weeks. The fighting continued without pause. The Krethic controlled the sky, but the humans controlled the ground. Every attempt to advance resulted in heavy losses. The aliens began to realize that taking this world would cost them dearly. In the command center, Governor Vasquez monitored the reports. They were holding on, but barely. Ammunition was running low. Medical supplies were critical. And still no help had arrived from Earth. How long can we last? She asked James Park. He did not sugarcoat the truth. 2 weeks. Maybe 3 if we are lucky. After that, we will run out of supplies. But Governor, we are doing something important here. We are showing them that humans do not break easily. We are buying time. Elena nodded. She picked up the microphone and began recording another message. This one would be broadcast to every human settlement in known space. Her voice was tired but unbroken. This is Governor Elena Vasquez of New Saskatchewan. We are under attack by the Krethic Dominion. We have not surrendered. We will not surrender. We are still here. We are still fighting. If anyone can hear this message, please know that we stood our ground. We did not run. We faced them and we made them bleed for every step. To all humans everywhere, remember New Saskatchewan. Remember that we were here and we did not yield. The message went out into the void. Elena did not know if anyone would hear it. She did not know if help would come. But she had spoken the truth. They had stood their ground. They had shown these aliens that humanity was not prey. And far away, in the depths of space, that message was received. The response would come soon. But first, the colonists had to survive long enough to see it. The 3rd week of fighting began with rain. Heavy drops pounded the roofs of New Hope, turning the streets into muddy rivers. The Krethic soldiers hated the rain. It interfered with their sensors and made the footing treacherous. But for Maria Chen and the other defenders, the rain was a blessing. It gave them cover and slowed the enemy advance. Maria crouched behind a makeshift barricade, her rifle resting on sandbags filled with local soil. Beside her was Tom Rodriguez, a miner who had worked the northern mountains for 15 years. He had thick arms and a graying beard, and he handled his weapon with the ease of long practice. "They're getting smarter," Tom said, peering through the rain at the enemy positions. "They are not charging straight at us anymore." Maria nodded. The Krethic had learned from their mistakes. They now moved carefully, using cover and suppressing fire. They had stopped underestimating the colonists. That made them more dangerous, but it also meant the humans were winning the psychological battle. The aliens knew they were in a real fight. A movement caught Maria's eye. 3 Krethic soldiers were trying to flank their position through a ruined building. She tapped Tom's shoulder and pointed. He saw them immediately. "I will take the left one. You get the other 2. They fired in unison. The Krethic dropped. Their armor no match for well-placed shots. Maria felt nothing. No triumph, no guilt, just the cold focus of survival. She had stopped thinking of them as individuals days ago. They were targets, threats, things that wanted to kill her family and take her home. In the hills outside town, another group of colonists prepared a different kind of ambush. These were the farmers who worked the northern fields, people who knew every trail and hiding spot in the forest. They had spent the last week studying Krethic patrol patterns, learning their habits and weaknesses. Jacob Miller led the group. He was young, only 24, but he had grown up hunting in these woods. He knew how to move silently, how to read the signs of the forest. Now he used those skills to hunt something far more dangerous than deer. The Krethik patrol came down the trail right on schedule. 12 soldiers moving in a tight formation. They were confident, scanning the trees but not expecting trouble. They had learned to fear the human towns, but they thought the wilderness was safe. They were wrong. Jacob raised his hand. His team waited, fingers on triggers. He let the patrol get deeper into the kill zone. Then he dropped his hand. The forest erupted in gunfire. The Krethik tried to return fire, but they could not see their attackers. The humans had positioned themselves perfectly, using the natural terrain for cover. Within seconds, the entire patrol was down. Jacob and his team quickly gathered the alien weapons and melted back into the trees. They would be kilometers away before reinforcements arrived. This was the pattern that emerged. The colonists could not win a direct fight against the Krethik fleet, but they could make occupation impossible. They used guerrilla tactics, hit-and-run attacks, and intimate knowledge of their world. Every alien patrol that left base faced ambush. Every supply convoy needed heavy escort. The Krethik were winning in the air, but losing on the ground. In his command ship, Draxar studied the casualty reports with growing frustration. He had lost over 3,000 soldiers. 3,000. On a farming colony that was supposed to surrender in hours. The Dominion High Command was demanding explanations. He had none to give. These humans are unlike any species we have encountered, Calith reported. They do not have advanced technology. They do not have superior numbers. But they have something else. They refuse to accept defeat. Draxar slammed his fist on the console. Stubbornness is not a military advantage. We have the superior force. We will break them eventually. Perhaps, Calith said carefully. But at what cost? We have lost more troops here than in our last 5 conquests combined. And, sir, there is something else you should know. The humans sent out a distress signal before we could jam their communications. It reached their home system. Draxar felt cold fear grip his chest. When? The first day of the attack. We estimate human reinforcements could arrive within weeks if they choose to send them. If they choose. That was the question. Would Earth really send a fleet to save one small colony? Draxar had studied human history. They were divided, often fighting among themselves. Surely they would not unite over 50,000 farmers on a distant world. But doubt nagged at him. These colonists fought with a ferocity that spoke of deeper cultural values. Perhaps he had miscalculated. Perhaps he did not understand humans as well as he thought. Double the patrols, he ordered, and fortify our positions. If human ships do come, we will be ready. Back in the command center, Governor Vasquez received different news. A coded message had come through on a backup channel. It was brief, just a few words, but those words changed everything. Help is coming. Hold on. Elena felt tears sting her eyes. She had not let herself hope, had not let herself believe that Earth would respond. But they were coming. Humanity was coming to save its own. She called together her senior staff. James Park, the military coordinator. Dr. Sarah Kim, the chief medical officer. Marcus Johnson, who coordinated the civilian resistance. They all looked exhausted, running on stimulants and sheer determination. But when Elena told them the news, life returned to their eyes. How long do we need to hold? Marcus asked. At least 2 more weeks. Maybe 3. Can we last that long? James Park ran the numbers in his head. Ammunition, medical supplies, food, water. They were running low on everything. But they had one advantage. The Krethik thought the humans were on the verge of collapse. They did not know about the message. They did not know help was coming. We can last, James said. But we need to change our strategy. Stop trying to hold territory. Focus on survival and harassment. Make them think we are weaker than we are. When the fleet arrives, we want the Krethik concentrated around our settlements, not spread out across the planet. It was a good plan, a smart plan, but it meant giving up ground they had fought hard to keep. It meant watching the aliens occupy their towns, their homes. It took everything Elena had to give the order. Do it. Tell our people to fall back to the secondary positions. We are not retreating. We are setting a trap. The colonists pulled back over the next several days. They abandoned the outer settlements, collapsing into defensive positions in the hills and forests. The Krethik, sensing victory, pressed their advantage. They occupied New Hope and the other towns, raising their banners and declaring the planet conquered. But the humans did not stop fighting. They raided supply depots. They sabotaged equipment. They sniped at patrols. The Krethik held the towns, but they could not leave them safely. They were surrounded by an invisible enemy that struck without warning and vanished like ghosts. Maria Chen moved through the forest with her unit, living off the land and moving constantly. Her children were safe in the deep bunkers, protected by layers of rock and concealment. David was with another group, harassing the enemy's northern flank. They communicated through coded messages, brief words of love and encouragement. She was tired, so tired, her muscles ached. Her hands were blistered. She had not slept more than 3 hours at a stretch in weeks, but she kept moving. They all kept moving, because they knew help was coming. They just had to survive long enough to see it. On the 20th day of occupation, something changed in the enemy's behavior. The Krethik patrols became more aggressive, their attacks more coordinated. Draxar had clearly decided to finish this before human reinforcements arrived. He was throwing everything he had at the colonists, trying to break them before help could arrive. The pressure was immense. The colonists took heavy casualties. Dr. Kim worked around the clock in a field hospital hidden in a cave system, saving who she could and mourning those she could not. Supplies dwindled to almost nothing. People fought with empty stomachs and makeshift bandages. But they did not break. They held the line because they knew what was at stake. This was not just about New Saskatchewan. This was about showing the galaxy what humans were made of. This was about proving that humanity would not accept conquest, that they would fight no matter the odds. On the 23rd day, James Park received a new message. This one included a timestamp and coordinates. The fleet would arrive in 48 hours. They just needed to hold on for 2 more days. He passed the word to every unit. 2 more days, 48 hours. They could do this. They had come too far to fail now. In orbit, Draxar made his final preparations. He had committed almost his entire ground force to crushing the human resistance. Victory was close. He could feel it. In a matter of days, this world would be his, and these troublesome humans would be dead or enslaved. He did not know that the real battle had not yet begun. The distress signal from New Saskatchewan traveled through space at the speed of light, reaching Earth 5 days after the attack began. It arrived during a session of the United Earth Assembly, interrupting debates about trade regulations and colonial infrastructure funding. When the signal played over the speakers, the entire chamber fell silent. "This is Governor Elena Vasquez of New Saskatchewan. We are under attack by hostile alien forces, requesting immediate military assistance. We will hold as long as possible." The assembly erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted questions. Some demanded immediate action. Others called for caution. But beneath the noise there was something else, something that surprised even the most cynical politicians. There was anger, deep, burning anger. Humanity had been exploring space for nearly 2 centuries. They had met other species, traded with alien civilizations, and carved out their place in the galaxy through commerce and diplomacy. They had fought wars among themselves, yes, but never had an alien power attacked a human world. Never had someone from outside humanity threatened one of their colonies. The attack on New Saskatchewan changed everything. Admiral Catherine Morrison stood before the assembly. She was a veteran of the Colonial Defense Forces, a woman who had spent 40 years building Earth's modest fleet. She had gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that had seen too many training exercises and not enough real combat. That was about to change. "Members of the assembly," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "We have 37 military vessels within 6 days' travel of New Saskatchewan. We have another 83 ships that could be retrofitted for combat within 2 weeks. I am requesting authorization to deploy immediately." The vote was not close. 412 votes in favor, 3 against. The 3 dissenting votes came from representatives who thought the assembly should send even more ships. Within hours, the mobilization began. But it was not just the military that responded. News of the attack spread across Earth and the human colonies like wildfire. People watched the broadcasts with growing fury. The footage of alien ships bombarding the orbital station, Governor Vasquez's defiant message. Reports of colonists fighting in the streets with hunting rifles and farm equipment. Something awakened in humanity that day. Something old and primal. The instinct to protect their own. The refusal to let anyone harm their people without consequence. Merchant captains volunteered their ships. Private security companies offered their services for free. Engineers worked around the clock installing weapon systems on civilian vessels. The response was overwhelming, chaotic, and utterly unprecedented. On Mars, Captain David Chen received the news while visiting his sister. He was a freighter captain, hauling ore between the asteroid mines and the inner planets. His ship, the Morning Star, was old and slow, built for cargo, not combat. But when he heard that New Saskatchewan was under attack, he made a decision. His wife Maria was on New Saskatchewan. His children were there, his home. He gathered his crew. All of them had family or friends on the colony world. They voted unanimously to join the fleet. They spent 2 days welding armor plates to the hull and mounting railguns to the cargo arms. The Morning Star would never be mistaken for a warship, but she could fight. That would have to be enough. Ships like the Morning Star joined from every corner of human space. Mining vessels, colony transports, even luxury yachts, their wealthy owners demanding to be part of the rescue fleet. Admiral Morrison found herself commanding the largest human armada ever assembled. Over 200 ships ranging from cutting-edge destroyers to converted garbage scows with improvised weapons. It should have been a logistical nightmare. But somehow it worked. The military vessels provided coordination. The civilian captains followed orders. And everyone understood the mission. Get to New Saskatchewan, save the colonists, make the aliens pay. As the fleet assembled, intelligence officers worked to learn everything they could about the Krethic Dominion. The reports were not encouraging. The Krethic had conquered 17 species over the past 3 centuries. They were experienced warriors with advanced technology. By all accounts, they should win easily against humanity's hastily assembled fleet. But the intelligence officers found something interesting. In all their previous conquests, the Krethic had never faced serious resistance. They attacked weak targets, species without strong militaries or unified governments. They were bullies picking on those who could not fight back. They had never fought someone who fought back as hard as the New Saskatchewan colonists, and they had certainly never faced a response like the one humanity was preparing. Admiral Morrison studied the tactical reports in her ready room. Her second-in-command, Commander James Park, stood beside her. He was the brother of the military coordinator on New Saskatchewan, and his face was tight with worry. "How long can they hold?" he asked quietly. Morrison did not sugarcoat it. 2 weeks, maybe 3 if they are lucky and smart. The good news is that they are both. The reports say they are using guerrilla tactics, making the Krethic pay for every meter. Your brother knows what he is doing. Will we get there in time? We will, because we have to. The fleet departed 2 days later. The images were broadcast across human space. Hundreds of ships flying in formation, heading toward the frontier. It was the largest military operation in human history, and it was happening because 50,000 farmers had refused to surrender. Other species watched the broadcasts with fascination and fear. The Krethic Dominion had seemed untouchable, a major power that lesser species feared. But now this young species called humanity was assembling an armada to challenge them. It was audacious. It was possibly suicidal. It was also profoundly inspiring. The Talon Confederacy, a species that had lost 2 worlds to Krethic conquest, sent a private message to Earth. They offered intelligence, star charts, and tactical analysis of Krethic warships. They did not send soldiers or ships, but they sent something more valuable. They sent hope that the Krethic could be beaten. The journey took 18 days. For the people on New Saskatchewan, those were the longest days of their lives. They fought and died and held on by their fingernails. They did not know if help would arrive in time. They only knew they had to keep fighting. For the people in the fleet, the days were filled with preparation. Crews drilled constantly. Tacticians studied Krethic battle formations. Engineers made last-minute modifications to weapon systems. And everyone thought about the people they were going to save. The family members. The friends. The fellow humans who were fighting alone against impossible odds. Captain David Chen stood on the bridge of the Morning Star and looked at the stars ahead. Somewhere out there, his wife was fighting for her life. His children were hiding in bunkers. His home was burning. He had spent his life hauling cargo, avoiding danger, keeping his head down, but not anymore. Now he was part of something larger, something that mattered. "How long until we arrive?" he asked his navigator. 42 hours, Captain. 42 hours. Less than 2 days. They were so close now. He just hoped they were not too late. On the flagship, Admiral Morrison received a final message from New Saskatchewan. It was from Governor Vasquez, and it was brief. Still here. Still fighting. Hurry. Morrison felt her jaw tighten. She had served in the fleet for decades, commanded dozens of ships, trained thousands of officers. But she had never felt the weight of responsibility like she did now. Thousands of lives depended on her decisions. An entire colony was counting on her to arrive in time. She would not let them down. All ship, she broadcast on the fleet channel, increase speed to maximum. I want every engine running hot. We are not stopping until we reach New Saskatchewan. The response came from 200 captains at once. Yes, Admiral. The fleet accelerated. Ships that were never meant to move this fast pushed their engines to the limit. Civilian vessels with jury-rigged weapon systems kept pace with military destroyers. It was beautiful and terrifying and utterly human. They were coming to save their own. Nothing would stop them. In orbit around New Saskatchewan, Draxar made his final push. He sent every available soldier to the surface. This was the endgame. Either he would crush the human resistance in the next 48 hours, or he would have to explain to the Dominion High Command why a simple farming colony had cost them thousands of troops and months of time. He did not know that human sensors had already detected his ships. He did not know that a massive fleet was bearing down on his position. He did not know that his simple conquest had turned into something far more dangerous. He did not know that humanity was coming, and when they arrived, nothing would ever be the same again. The fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the New Saskatchewan system. 214 ships appeared in normal space simultaneously, their presence lighting up every sensor within 100 million kilometers. For a moment there was only silence. Then Admiral Morrison gave the order that would change everything. All ships, combat formation. Prepare to engage the enemy. On the surface of New Saskatchewan, Maria Chen huddled in a foxhole with 3 other defenders. They were exhausted, down to their last magazines of ammunition. The Krethic had been pushing hard for the past 2 days, throwing everything they had at the remaining human positions. Maria had not slept in 36 hours. Her hands shook from fatigue and hunger. Then the sky changed. Streaks of light appeared overhead, dozens of them, then hundreds. Maria looked up and felt her heart skip. She knew what those lights were, ships, human ships, dropping out of orbit and entering the atmosphere. They came, she whispered. They actually came. Tom Rodriguez grabbed her arm, his face split by a wide grin. We did it. We held on long enough. They are here. The message went out across every remaining human position. Hold your ground. Reinforcements have arrived. The effect was electric. Colonists who had been fighting on empty stomachs and sheer willpower suddenly found new strength. They were not alone anymore. Humanity had come. In orbit, Draxar stared at his sensor displays in disbelief. The readings made no sense. Over 200 human ships. How was this possible? The intelligence report said humans had a small fleet, scattered across dozens of systems. This was not a small response. This was an armada. Commander, what are your orders? Kelleth asked, her voice tight with tension. Draxar felt fear coil in his chest. He had 62 warships. The humans had more than 3 times that number. Yes, many of their vessels appeared to be converted civilian ships, but there were also dozens of military-grade destroyers and cruisers. And they were moving with purpose, with coordination that spoke of professional command. Prepare all ships for combat. Recall the ground forces immediately. We need every soldier back on the ships. Sir, if we recall the troops now, the colonists will counterattack. We will lose all the ground we have gained. We have already lost, Draxar said bitterly. The question now is whether we survive to retreat. The human fleet did not slow down. They came in fast and hard, weapons hot and targeting systems locked. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the tactical display with cold satisfaction. The Krethic ships were scrambling to form a defensive line. They were reacting, not acting. That meant the humans had already won the initiative. All ships, this is Admiral Morrison. You know what these aliens did to our people. You know how our colonists fought and bled while we raced to reach them. Now it is our turn. Show them what happens when you attack humanity. Show them what we do to those who threaten our own. All ships, weapons free. Engage at will. The battle began. The human fleet split into 3 groups using tactics that the Krethic had never encountered. One group drove straight at the enemy center, drawing their fire. Another swung wide, flanking from above the orbital plane. The third dropped low, coming up from beneath. It was a classic envelopment maneuver, something humans had been using since ancient times. The Krethik tried to adapt, but they were too slow. Human missiles filled the space between the fleets. Railgun rounds traveled at relativistic speeds, punching through shields and armor. Energy beams carved into enemy hulls. The converted civilian ships fought alongside the military vessels, their improvised weapons proving surprisingly effective. Captain David Chen watched from the bridge of the Morning Star as a Krethik cruiser exploded in a ball of white fire. His crew cheered. They were not trained warriors. They were freighter hands and cargo specialists. But they fought like heroes, manning their jury-rigged weapons with fierce determination. "Target that destroyer," David ordered. "The one trying to run for the jump point." The Morning Star's railgun spoke. The rounds took 30 seconds to cross the distance, but when they hit hard. The Krethik destroyer lost power and began drifting. A military frigate finished it off moments later. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it ended, 53 Krethik ships were destroyed or crippled. The remaining 9 vessels were desperately trying to retreat, engines burning at maximum as they ran for the jump point. The human fleet pursued, not willing to let any escape. Draxar sat in his command chair, watching his fleet die around him. His ship had taken heavy damage. Half his crew was dead. The bridge smelled of smoke and burned electronics. He had lost. Completely and utterly lost. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the human flagship. They are demanding our surrender." Surrender. The word tasted like poison. But what choice did he have? If he refused, his ship would be destroyed. His crew would die. He had already lost everything else. At least this way, some would survive. Accept their terms. Tell them we surrender. The remaining Krethik ships powered down their weapons. The human fleet surrounded them, guns trained but holding fire. Admiral Morrison watched the enemy vessels with a mixture of satisfaction and contempt. They had thought they could attack a human colony without consequence. They had learned otherwise, but the battle in space was only half the story. On the surface, something even more important was happening. When the Krethik troops received the recall order, they began pulling back to their landing zones. But the human colonists did not let them go easily. Maria Chen and her unit emerged from the forests, attacking the retreating aliens from behind. Other groups did the same across the planet. The colonists had spent weeks learning to fight these invaders. Now they used that knowledge with devastating effect. Human dropships began landing near the major settlements. Fresh troops poured out, well-equipped and ready to fight. But they found that the colonists had already done most of the work. The Krethik ground forces were broken, scattered, trying desperately to reach their ships before the humans could finish them. Maria stood on a hill overlooking New Hope. The town was damaged, scarred by weeks of combat. But it was still standing. They had held. Against all odds, against a superior enemy, they had held long enough for help to arrive. She felt tears streaming down her face. Relief, exhaustion, and grief all hit her at once. They had survived. But so many had not. She thought of the friends and neighbors who had fallen in the fighting. The people who would never see this moment. A hand touched her shoulder. She turned to see David, her husband, standing beside her in a military uniform. He must have come down with one of the first dropships. They embraced, holding each other tight, not speaking. There were no words for what they had been through. In the command center, Governor Elena Vasquez received the official report from Admiral Morrison. The space battle was over. The Krethik had surrendered. New Saskatchewan was secure. Elena felt something break inside her. She had carried the weight of this entire planet for weeks, making impossible decisions, watching people die because of orders she gave. It was over. They had won. James Park stood beside her, his face haggard but relieved. His brother had just arrived with the fleet and they had spoken briefly over the comm. Both were alive. Against all odds, they were both alive. "We need to document everything," Elena said, her voice hoarse from weeks of stress. "Every battle, every decision, every casualty. The galaxy needs to know what happened here." "Why?" James asked. "What does it matter now? We survived. That is what counts." Elena looked at him with tired eyes. "Because this was not just about us. This was about showing the galaxy what humans are capable of. We fought an enemy that has conquered 17 worlds. We held them off with hunting rifles and farm equipment. We refused to surrender even when defeat seemed certain, And when help came, all of humanity came together to save 50,000 farmers on a distant world. That story matters. That story changes things. She was right. The story of New Saskatchewan would spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Other species would hear about the colonists who fought against impossible odds. They would hear about the massive fleet that humanity assembled to save its own. They would learn that humans were not prey. They were not victims. They were something far more dangerous. They were a species that protected its own no matter the cost. As night fell over New Saskatchewan, the colonists began emerging from their hiding places. Families reunited. Friends embraced. The living mourned the dead, and above them the human fleet maintained orbit, a silent promise that they would never be abandoned again. The battle was over. But the real work was just beginning. 3 months after the battle, the memorial was completed. It stood in the center of New Hope, a simple stone monument listing the names of all who had fallen defending New Saskatchewan. 4,217 names: farmers, miners, teachers, children, people who should have lived long lives in peace but died fighting for their home. Maria Chen stood before the memorial with her husband and children. She found the name she was looking for: Tom Rodriguez, Sarah Nguyen, Marcus Freeman. Friends and neighbors who had fought beside her and never made it home. She placed flowers at the base of the monument, her children doing the same. The colony was rebuilding. New homes rose where old ones had been destroyed. The fields were being replanted. Life was slowly returning to normal, though it would never be quite the same. Everyone who lived through those weeks carried scars, visible and invisible, but they had survived. And in surviving, they had changed the galaxy. News of the battle spread across known space within weeks. Every species with spacefaring capability heard the story. A small human colony attacked by the powerful Krethic Dominion. Colonists who fought with primitive weapons and refused to surrender. An entire fleet assembled to save 50,000 farmers. A crushing victory against an enemy that had seemed unbeatable. The reactions varied by species. Some saw it as a cautionary tale. Others saw opportunity. But everyone understood the same basic message. Humanity was not to be trifled with. The Krethic Dominion faced humiliation on a scale they had never experienced. Draxar and his surviving officers were recalled to the homeworld to face judgment. The military campaign was declared a disaster. But more than that, it exposed a fundamental weakness in Krethic strategy. They were good at conquering the weak. They had no idea how to fight someone who fought back with real determination. The Dominion High Council debated their response for weeks. Some wanted revenge, demanding a larger fleet be sent to crush humanity completely. Others urged caution. The humans had mobilized over 200 ships in a matter of days. What could they do with months of preparation? What kind of force could they field if truly threatened? In the end, caution won. The Krethic withdrew from several border regions, pulling back their forces. They did not apologize. They did not pay reparations. But they also did not attack any more human colonies. The message was clear. Humanity was off limits. Other species took notice. The Talon Confederacy, which had secretly helped humanity with intelligence about the Krethic, now reached out openly. They proposed a formal alliance, mutual defense, and trade agreements. Earth accepted. Within months, 3 other species joined the agreement. The humans found themselves at the center of a growing coalition of worlds that had suffered under Krethic aggression. Admiral Morrison was promoted and given command of Earth's expanded fleet. The attack on New Saskatchewan had convinced the human governments that they needed stronger defenses. Shipyards across human space began working around the clock. New warships were commissioned. Training programs expanded. Humanity was preparing for a future where they might have to fight again, but they also remained true to their values. The captured Krethic soldiers were treated fairly. They received medical care, adequate food, and protection under human law. Many were eventually repatriated to their homeworld as part of a prisoner exchange. Some chose to stay, finding life under human rule preferable to returning to the Dominion. This confused many alien observers. Humans had every right to be brutal to their prisoners. The Krethic certainly would have been if the situations were reversed. But humans seemed to separate the crime from the punishment. They would fight ferociously to defend their own. But once the fight was over, they treated even their enemies with basic decency. It was this combination that made humanity truly frightening. Not just their capacity for violence, but their ability to control it, to unleash it when necessary and restrain it when appropriate, to be both warriors and diplomats, protectors and traitors. Governor Elena Vasquez became something of a celebrity across human space. She gave speeches, wrote articles, and met with leaders from dozens of worlds. But she always made it clear that she was not a hero. The real heroes were the colonists who fought and died, the people who held the line when everything seemed lost. She also warned against arrogance. Yes, they had won. Yes, they had proven that humanity could defend itself, but that did not mean they should become aggressors. The lesson of New Saskatchewan was not that humans should conquer others. It was that they would protect their own and expect others to leave them in peace. Her message resonated with most of humanity. There were some who wanted to use their new military strength to expand territory, to punish the Krethik more severely. But the majority agreed with Elena. They had fought for the right to be left alone, not for the right to dominate others. A year after the battle, a diplomatic summit was held on a neutral station. Representatives from dozens of species gathered to discuss the changing political landscape. The Krethik Dominion sent delegates, though they sat in the back and said little. They were no longer the dominant power everyone feared. They were just another empire, forced to acknowledge that they could not simply take whatever they wanted. Humanity sent a delegation led by Admiral Morrison and Governor Vasquez. They presented a simple proposal, a set of rules for interaction between spacefaring species, respect for territorial boundaries, protection of colonists, peaceful resolution of disputes, and consequences for those who violated these principles. It was not a perfect system. Many species had objections and concerns, but it was a start, and it was built on the foundation of what happened at New Saskatchewan, the idea that aggression would be met with unified resistance, that smaller powers could defend themselves if larger powers stood together. The summit did not solve everything. There would still be conflicts, still be violence in the galaxy, but it changed the conversation. Species that had felt helpless against predatory empires now saw hope. Humanity had shown that resistance was possible, that determination and unity could overcome superior force. Back on New Saskatchewan, life continued. The scars of war slowly faded, though they never fully disappeared. Children grew up hearing stories of the siege, of the brave men and women who held the line. The colony grew stronger, more prosperous. New settlers arrived, attracted by the legend of the place that refused to surrender. Maria Chen returned to farming. Her fields produced their best harvest ever the year after the battle. She liked to think it was the soil, enriched by all the struggle. But really, it was simpler than that. She worked the land with renewed appreciation. She had almost lost this place, this life. Now she treasured it more than ever. Her children asked about the war sometimes. They wanted to know what it was like, whether she was scared, how many aliens she killed. She answered honestly. Yes, she was terrified. Yes, she did things she wished she did not have to do. But she would do it all again to protect her family and her home. She also taught them something else. That strength was not just about fighting. It was about knowing when to fight and when to show mercy, about protecting those who needed protection and giving others the same freedom you wanted for yourself. These were human values, not perfect, not always followed, but strived for. And they were the values that had saved New Saskatchewan, not the weapons, not the tactics, but the fundamental belief that people had worth, that homes were worth defending. The communities mattered more than conquest. 5 years after the battle, a Krethik delegation visited New Saskatchewan. It was a small group, diplomats and scholars interested in studying what had happened. They were escorted by human security, though no incidents occurred. The Krethik were polite, respectful, even apologetic in their own way. One of them, a younger officer who had not been part of the original attack, spoke with Governor Vasquez. "We underestimated you," he said simply. "We thought you were weak because you prioritized trade over conquest. We thought your compassion was weakness. We were wrong about everything." Elena nodded. "You made a mistake. You learned from it. That is more than some species ever do. The question is, what will you do with that knowledge?" The young Krethik thought for a moment. "We are changing. Slowly. There are those of us who believe the old ways are not sustainable, that the Dominion must adapt or fade into irrelevance. What happened here proved that. You did not just defeat us militarily. You showed that there was another way to be strong. It was not a dramatic change, The Krethic Dominion would remain aggressive and authoritarian for generations, but seeds of doubt had been planted. Questions about whether conquest was really the path to greatness, whether there might be wisdom in the human approach. The galaxy was changing. Not overnight, not completely. But the ripples from New Saskatchewan continued to spread. Species talked differently about humanity now, with respect, with caution, but also with curiosity. What other surprises did these strange apes have? What would they do next? The answer was simple. They would explore. They would trade. They would build colonies and raise families. They would be peaceful neighbors and reliable partners. But they would also maintain their strength. They would remember New Saskatchewan and the lessons learned there, that an attack on any human was an attack on all humanity.